A good Erev Shabbos Kodesh. First of all, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy, physically and spiritually. Today we're going to talk about something which encompasses our entire Avodas Hashem. As usual, we'll start with tzedakah, gdel tzedakah, shemakareves sagula. Since the war started, we added tzedakah. Mashiach should come now. We're going to say for our prayer this week a pasuk which we started saying from Aleph the Chodesh Elul, a pasuk from Kapitel Chav Zayin, which is also going to be, in a word, the central nukuda of what we're going to speak about today, the central point. And that pasuk is L'cha Omar Libi Bak Shufonoi Es Panecha Adinoi Avakesh, which literally translated is that my heart says, in your behalf, my heart says, seek my countenance. Your countenance, Hashem, I seek. So, Panecha means the face, Hashem's face. But I think, as we've spoken about this before, Panecha means also Pnimius. Go for what's deep. Go for what's inside. Not for what's superficial, not for what's surface, etc. And that's also going to be related to the mitzvah that we're going to speak about today, connected to Parsha Shavua. So, what we're going to speak about today is, everyone knows that Rosh Hashanah's El is Ani L'Deidi. I am to my beloved, referring to Hashem, and I, as an individual, cry out, declare to Hashem, Ani L'Deidi. But the question is, who are you? Where do you come from? Who are you? Before we speak about details about my intellect and my emotions, there might be something which is a very strong key to functionality and to success that encompasses my entire personality and my entire identity and everything that's all about me. And that will make the Ani, when I say Ani, L'Doidi, and I make this proclamation of pledging allegiance, as we said once before, that should be successful. So, I'm always trying to listen to the messages for Hashem, to think about what we should focus on. So in this week's Parsha, I saw a certain message twice. And what was that? The message, the idea of trees. And in a very interesting way, and it made me thinking. In the beginning of this week's Parsha, which is Shoftim v'Shoitrim, Parsha Shoftim, and it speaks about authority. It speaks about kings. It speaks about the judicial system. It speaks about judges. It speaks about authority. Many different forms of authority. So the Torah starts off Shoftim v'Shoitrim Tidlecha b'chol sharecha, and then right after that, 3 psukim later, it says, Loisita l'cha asheira kol eitz eitzel mizbach Hashem alikecha asher tasalach. I'm going to read you the translation from the Kahos Chumash. You have been told not to worship idols, and moreover to uproot all deified trees you encounter in the land of Israel. In addition, you must not even plant for yourself such a deified tree, for even merely planting such a tree is a punishable offense, whether or not you worship it. Furthermore, you must not plant any type of tree or build a house near the altar of Hashem, your Hashem, that you will make for yourself on the Temple Mountain. So here, straight away, it's talking about idolatry. And in particular, you'd think there's many, many details encompassing all the idolatries of the world. But still, the pasuk says, "Leisita l'cha asheira kol eitz eitzel mizbach Hashem alikecha asher tasalach." What's this particular focus on the idea of not following in the ways of the idolaters by planting a tree next to the altar? So what comes out is that, first of all, what is the meaning over here? There's 2 general meanings, prohibitions connected to this verse. Number 1, you shouldn't make a tree with the intention to serve that tree, which means the tree is the idol. Number 2, you shouldn't plant a tree next to the Mizbeach, which means that we'll soon see from the Chinuch that by the ways of the Goyim, the idolaters, they would have an altar also, and next to the altar they would want to make some spectacles, some grand landscapes, some beautiful gardens to make it more attractive. So in our serving Hashem, we shouldn't do something which is like Chukas HaGoyim, which is doing something which is Shaloi Lavid Hashem B'derech HaGoyim, that when they serve their idol, they have certain practices that go together with it, and that is to try to make something surrounding them, beautiful shrubbery, etc., etc. That's also an Isur D'Oraisa. Okay, so we're soon going to get to the meaning over here for a second, but first, I want to say what I said, that it was a double message. At the end of the parsha, it speaks about if you're going to conquer a foreign land from a different country, and the pasuk says that you should not cut down a fruit tree, because man is compared to a tree. We once spoke about this. So here we see a contrast, that in the beginning of the parsha, of everything and all the different practices and rituals that the Gentiles did when it came to serving idols, we picked out this idea of not planting a tree. And over here, in the end of the parsha, it says, don't destroy a tree, a fruit-bearing tree. And in general, we have to understand the juxtaposition over here, default rein over here in the beginning, Shoftim v'Shoftim titlecha, and then it says, you shouldn't make an Asherah next to the Mizbach Hashem. Like, what's the connection? If it would say, Lisita Asherah, right after Necha Havaya Lekecha, we're talking about Achlas Havaya, fine. But when it comes to this over here with these Bezdin, and we're talking about judges, why over here now did the Torah decide to put in these psukim, talking about the Zorah, when afterwards it continues with kings and different ideas of authority, etc. Anyways, to understand all this, maybe we could say, and the source of what I'm going to say now really was from a letter from the Rebbe, which I'm going to translate in English, just read some of the translation. But what triggered this was that I saw two stories of the Rebbe this week about confidence. Let's start with the concept of confidence. You could say, what does a tree represent? The tree represents standing tall and straight. The reference of a tree is, especially if you think about the redwood trees of California, things that are grand, glorious. And that's part of the reasons why the Goyim would plant them next to where they were doing their idolatry, was because it makes a huge impression. It's beautiful, it's grand, it's epic. So the idea of a tree could represent man's ego. We'll call it ego in the negative sense. We'll soon get to the positive, as we said before, confidence. What's a tree? A tree grows tall and strong. But how? When it's connected to its roots properly. That's the positive point. So let's first talk about Ki Ha'odam Eitz HaSodeh, the end of the parsha, with the Rebbe in two sichas and Likutei Sichas, Chelik Daled, and primarily this point in Chelik Chov Daled, where the Rebbe talks about the idea of a tree represents Tzormeach. There's four categories of creation. There's inanimate, vegetation, the animal kingdom, and humans. One of the aspects, unique traits of the plant kingdom is that they're attached to their source. And they have to be always attached to the source. Only when they're attached to the source, connected to the source, do they continue growing, do they continue being tzomeach, vegetation. And as we mentioned once before, this saying, which I love very much, the deeper the roots, the stronger the tree. So what does the idea represent? Ki Ha'odam. If you want to know who you are, it's asadi, know where you come from. And then you'll be a strong tree. So the conviction of your personality, of your identity, is in direct relation and proportion to your connecting to your source. And just to read you in the words of English, what the Rebbe wrote to a certain person who felt very shaky about life and the future, the Rebbe wrote, true security is through connecting with your source, which is above and beyond you. A person should be aware of his family's history and traditions, including his ancestors, which means even Avraham Avinu, etc., which his ancestors are present, hidden in their souls, hidden in our souls. Then you realize you are not alone, and that the control you have in life over your destiny is limited. And primarily, the matter is dependent on Hashem. So you're connected to your source. The power of your source is infinity. Connect more to that infinity, and through that power, you'll be able to overcome whatever comes your way. When you connect with your roots, it brings you tranquility and enables you to persevere through all challenges and carry out whatever your mission in life is. So here we see clearly how the Rebbe says that the person's confidence, in direct proportion to the measure of his being connected to his roots, to his source, that gives him greater confidence. And over here we're going to say your roots are the Jewish nation, Jewish history, Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, etc. Now, there's a word that I once saw from Rabbi Tursky, the famous Rabbi Tursky, which is a Meidik word, and that really is what I'm going to say right now about in Pasha Shoftim. He said the following in Pashas Re'eh. Re'eh! Person should look, Anoichi, at his Anoichi, at his I, at his ego, and realize Bracha Klola could be a blessing. It could be the greatest gift that God gave man. Independence, individuality. Or Klola could be the worst thing. It could bring him down when you're full of vanity, when you're full of arrogance. The question is, will your ego, let's put it that way, we're calling it ego, even though ego usually means only negative, but right now we're using it as neutral. Will your ego be something which is constructive or destructive? What is the meaning of that? And this is the point. The point is, when you speak about a person, we started saying today about Ani l'doidi, who is the Ani? So we have to realize in Chassidus we talk about koiches, that's your personality, your IQ, and your emotions. And then we say there's the levushim, there's your actions. Thoughts means what thought is occupying your brain space right now. Speech, what you're speaking, and then maisa, your actions. So Chassidus says that obviously that your actions don't necessarily reflect who the person is. Then we go deeper, even though your personality, your IQ, and your emotions and your character traits do reflect who the person is much more. But then there are certain things that affect everything. Like, for example, when we say simcha, and as we mentioned many times, in Chassidus Shaveta, we say, durch simcha, through joy, can sich alles auftan. Everything can be accomplished. Aber on simcha, durch atzvus, can gar nicht auftan. But through depression, nothing could be accomplished. So that's why Chassidus emphasizes and stresses so much the importance of joy, because joy is not a particular emotion. You know what joy is? Joy is like the power on, power off switch. It doesn't affect details. It doesn't affect specifics. It's whether the entire machine is functioning. Now the same thing is true over here when we talk about confidence. If the person has self-confidence, self-esteem. The Rambam is the same thing, but for today's lesson, we're going to put them together. If a person has confidence and he has self-esteem, positive self-esteem, can sich aufzuften, then he can accomplish everything. But if he doesn't have it, or chas v'sholem, if what he has is called ego, if he has arrogance, then even if he may accomplish something, it's not going to be positive at all. Sooner or later, it's going to come crashing down. And this is the difference between the beginning of the parsha and the end of the parsha. The Baal HaTurim brings down a Meridik Avot, and then we might connect it to the Chinuch. Time is running out. The Baal HaTurim brings down a Gemara. He says the Gematria. You look up the Baal HaTurim, but I'm just going to quote you straight from the Gemara. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Daf Zayin Amid Beis, Omer Shlokish said, Kol Amay Medayin Al Hatzibur, whoever appoints a judge over a community, She'eni Hogim, but the judge is not a proper judge, he's an unfit judge. Kilu Neitei Asherah B'Yisrael. It's as if he planted an Asherah B'Yisrael. So Shlokish says this statement, and then Rav Ashi added to that, U'b'mokim sheish Talmidei Chachamim, but in a community with the other more appropriate judges, Kilu Notei Eitzel Mizbeach, it's then like he planted this Asherah next to the Mizbeach, Shenema Eitzel Mizbeach Hashem Alikecha. So, what is the connection? Now I'll answer the question we started up today's lesson. Maybe you could say, Ulay Shlema. Why does the Torah right away put this next to Shoftim v'Shoitrim? Because the position, the institution, judicial system represents a tree. It's grand, it's tall, it's powerful. So the question is, do we corrupt it, Chas v'Shalom Rachmanu Litzlan, or not? When you put in place a judge, Kol Amay Medayin Al Hatzibur She'eni Hogim, Kil Neitei Asherah B'Yisrael Rachmanu Litzlan, the Asherah itself is a problem. It's like an Avodah Zarah. You took the most powerful tool, like we say religion is a powerful tool. Justice is the most powerful tool. Could you imagine when the Justice Department or justice itself is corrupted? That means you took a glorious tree, which could be used as a tool to say Marabo Masech Hashem, Agodo Masech Hashem, or like independence and individuality, which is the most powerful tool given to mankind. It can be channeled in the right direction, it can be channeled in the wrong direction. So that's the connection between, right away after Shoftim v'Shoitrim, he brings Leisita Asherah. You shouldn't be, why? So that's what the pasuk says, and the Baal HaTurim remembers, brings down this Gemara to explain the connection between Leisita Asherah and Shoftim v'Shoitrim. You want to know what the connection is? Rish Lakish already brought out the connection. But the Baal HaTurim doesn't explain the why. He just brings the quote from the Rish Lakish that says that Kol Amay Medayin Al Hatzibur She'eni Hogim Kil Neitei Asherah B'Yisrael. And maybe we could say, because it shows on the corruption, the greater the power, the greater the force, the greater the institution, the more terrible and disastrous is when that itself is corrupted or going in the wrong direction. Like a tree. And then Rav Ashi says that when you do it b'makom sheish Talmidei Chachamim, that's the second issue involved in making the Asherah. Not only the idea of the Avodah Zarah itself, but you're now going to put it next to the Mizbeach Hashem, which is another pshat in this pasuk, as we mentioned in the beginning, because then it's a distraction. And over here, I want to read you what the Chinuch says, because this is going to be connecting also how we spoke in the beginning of this year about Pnimius. Listen to the words of the chinuch. It's a mamish Chassidish word. He said you shouldn't plant trees in the Mikdash. And B'tam Yisuzeh, the reason for this prohibition, Kosav Rambam Zechon Levracha, the Rambam wrote, the people that served idolatry, they used to do this. The Botei Avodah Zarah Shalem, Shenetum Shom Ilonis Yofim, at their, we'll call it churches. I don't know if they would plant beautiful trees. And in order to distance ourselves to anything that even compares or resembles the thoughts of people should know that the ones that are going to serve the Eibishter, so therefore we're not allowed to plant any trees next to the place of the Beis HaMikdash and the Azorah, because that would give the person the wrong impression that by us, our relation to Hashem is connected to spectacle, is connected to theatrics, is connected to a beautiful garden. That's not what it's about. It's about pnimis, bakshufonai. It's about sacrifice. It's about us getting close and intimate with Hashem. It's not about seeking audience approval by trying to draw them in through external things that seem attractive. Now, based on this, what the Chinuch says, so comes the Pshat of Rav Ashi, tells us another thing about the Vort. What happens when it's b'makom sheyesh talmidei chachamim, when the scholars killing the Torah itzel mizbeach, is because that means there's other scholars in the city, in the town, and you didn't go for the scholars that had the real traits and requirements to be a Rav. They know a lot of Torah, they have good midas, they have Avos Yisrael. What did you fall for? You fell for the facade, you fell for the fancy tie, you fell for the chup, you fell for the rabbi that speaks in eloquent English. Every single box that you thought was important for the rabbi was like the Asherah. It looked glorious on the outside. But what's really important is Torah, Yiras Shamayim, Midas Tovos. Is that who you choose as the judge? Is that who you chose as the judge? No. You were my Medayin al Tzibur Sheni Hagen, even though it was a community that had Talmidei Chachamim. And the reason is why, obviously, the reason why he chose that person. Because externally, for the poster, for the advertisements, it looked good, etc., etc. Okay, so I want to finish with two stories that I mentioned before, that these two stories were what made me start thinking about this. Is there was a story with a couple, one story with a couple. They went to the Rebbe and they told the Rebbe that they're moving from a Hebrew day school. They're putting the child from who was previously in a Hebrew day school into a regular yeshiva. Obviously, the difficulty in the Hebrew studies of a Hebrew day school is very minimal. But once you go to yeshiva, it's much more hard, real learning Torah. So the kid was in third grade, and the mother is talking to the Rebbe, and the mother's telling the Rebbe that she's very worried. She doesn't know if the kid is really up to it yet, and she would like the Rebbe's blessing that he should succeed, because this is a very, very big leap for him. He's not really on their level of that grade, but she wants it because it's a better environment to be an observant, living Jew, etc. And he's going to be going there without friends. So the Rebbe tells her, number one, try to get a tutor to bring him up to par, to the level of that class. Speak to him very, positive. Tell him he's older and therefore he's wiser, and therefore we have to go to the next level. We're taking this next level in learning Torah. And then the Rebbe finishes off, to develop and foster his self-confidence to be able to accomplish all of the above. So in other words, there's a famous expression of Chassidus, Das is miftech the kolshis. Das is the key then to all the character traits. To paraphrase that saying, we could say confidence is miftech the kolul kula. That in a certain sense, confidence is the key to your entire identity to be able to maximize your potential. And that's why, and it's especially appropriate now, at the beginning of the new year, we have to realize, connect to the source, connect to Torah, as verbunden eben fallen wir schon unten, and you'll be able to carry through everything because you'll have the confidence to be able to do it. The other story I saw this week, it could bring me to tears when you think about it, and you have to think about and put yourself into the shoes of the person. There's a son who says a story that happened with his father in 1956 in Montreal. His father had a business in a 3-story building. He was a tailor, he sold clothes. He had 2 tenants that were living in this building. In 1956, he was notified by the insurance company that they're not taking any more, they're canceling the insurance on the whole building. It was an 80-year-old building, and he didn't know what to do. The son went with the father to Yechidis, as we'll see. He's telling the story. My father didn't know what to do. No one else was going to take the insurance, and he didn't have the money to tear down the whole building to build a new building. The problem was the building wasn't insurable because of many, many factors. And he didn't have the money to build a new building, and he didn't know what he could do. Anyways, he couldn't handle it. This is the son saying, my father couldn't handle it. He didn't know how to deal with it. And someone advised him to go see the Rebbe. He traveled to the Rebbe from Montreal to New York with his son, and he walked into Yechidus with the Rebbe, and he stood right at the desk of the Rebbe with his hands flat on the desk, with his back bent over. And that's how he'd been for a couple of months, bent over and depressed and despondent. As he had his hand on the desk and his back bent over, the Rebbe said, Reb Nosson! That was the name of the father. Reb Nosson! Stand up straight! The father listened immediately. He took his hands off the table, off the desk, and he stood up straight. The Rebbe told him, you have to be like a soldier who's going out to battle. He goes besimcha. He goes with a joy and emunah and betochen that he's going to win. And that's why he wins, and that's the only way you win. You have to go back to Montreal besimcha, but with the emunah and betochen that the Eibush is on your side and you're going to win. You need to go into the bank and go into the bank manager and to the mortgage company and to the insurance and speak to them in such a way, full of confidence, with the emunah and betochen, etc., as we mentioned before. The son says, my father heard these words. He was a changed man. He went back to Montreal. He spoke to the bank manager, etc., etc. And in the end, he was able to raise the money and get the loans and the mortgages to be able to, I don't know exactly what, rebuild the building, and his business flourished, etc. So here we see again how important it is to have the confidence and how we get the confidence. Like in the story with his father, because the Eibush is on your side. You have to have that emunah and betochen and the tzaddikim, etc. So this is the message and why it's so important in the month of Elul. Ani l'doidi. How are you going to be able to get from the ani to l'doidi with everything with all your possessions, with all your talents, with all your character traits, with all your faculties, with your entire personality. Re'ei anoichi, re'ei ani, you're ani. Could be a bracha klola. If it's going to be the union of confidence in a positive way, but based on the fact that this is, you matter because Hashem decides you matter, then it's not a problem. Then it's positive self-esteem. When you're filled with duty and responsibility. But if it's vanity, hey, ani, when you say ani and you think about, you think you're special because you decided you're special, then you're full of entitlement and expectations, etc. Anyways, the Rebbe should help. We should have the right attitude. We have to know take mamish, mamish, mamish. Ki ha'odam eitz hasodeh. Be connected to your roots. Be full of confidence and self-esteem. And the Rebbe should tell him that when you set yourself in such a way, you'll be matzliach ad bli dai b'teiva nirvanigla, and through our avodah, we did our same tasam alecha melech, and because we have same tasam alecha melech, therefore, this is the irony of Yiddishkeit, because we proclaim Eved Melech, Melech, so then we get the confidence because we have the power of the king together behind us, and through our avodah, this will cause the Eibishter to bring the Gula Mitzvah Shleimo, taking that mamish, posting from my home, Bez Hashem Yisborech, you're a man in Melbourne.